Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Chelsea Wooding, and I am so excited and honored to be presenting to you my presentation entitled One Note at a Time, Exploring the Connection Between Performance Psychology and Musicians. First and foremost, I just want to take a second and thank the MTNA conference organizers for thinking so creatively, thinking outside of the box, to still be able to provide content and provide resources to you all, even when we're in a time of social distancing. I was so excited when I was asked to present at the conference, the opportunity to interact with you all, to meet you all, get to know more about you, and potentially share some of my expertise, my training in a way that might be beneficial and help you all. I couldn't have been more excited. Obviously, I was bummed when the conference was canceled. And again, I'm just so grateful that I still have an opportunity to interact with you all, even though it's in a very non-traditional way, that we can still come together and learn and teach each other. So I will be including my contact information at the end of the presentation, and I invite you to please reach out. Let me know what was helpful. Let me know what questions you have, because I would love to engage in conversation even beyond this individual presentation. But before I jump into the content itself, you might be wondering why on earth I chose a background for this presentation to music educators, music teachers, that is a snowy mountain range. Well, I am a certified mental performance consultant. I consult with performers from a wide variety of performance domains, trying to help them increase the chances of reaching their potential in performance, particularly when performance matters most. I am also a professor of sport and performance psychology at the undergrad and master's level. And when I talk to people about my teaching philosophy and my coaching philosophy, my consulting philosophy, I compare it often to that of a Sherpa. I'm going to climb the mountain alongside of you, but I cannot climb the mountain for you. That ultimately is your choice. That's your decision. That's your path. I'm going to be alongside you the entire way, offering suggestions, offering resources, strategies and tools, ideas, recommendations, but I cannot climb the mountain for you. You have to do that work yourself. And I think as music educators and teachers, hopefully you can relate to that approach, that you are there and you are with your students. But ultimately, you cannot do the work for them, even though I think sometimes we so wish we could, right? We so want to be able to just pull them through those obstacles or pull them through those difficulties. Ultimately, there's so much to be learned in that journey. And it's actually a good thing that they get to climb the mountain themselves, because then when they reach the summit, it means so much more to them. But that is why I used this background to represent that approach, to represent that philosophy. And I hope in this presentation, I will give you some tools to keep in your toolbox that you might be able to share with your students, with those with whom you interact, but also for your own practice, for your own life. Yes, these skills hopefully will apply well to music and music education, but hopefully they'll apply to a broader perspective in your life as well and be helpful to you too. So before jumping in, I thought it might be beneficial to give a little bit of information about myself, my background, and what on earth I'm doing here presenting. So in full transparency, I myself am not a musician. I grew up as a pre-professional dancer. I grew up as a dancer. I started dancing at a very young age. I grew up in a home that really appreciated sport and physical activity. I have an older brother. He played a wide variety of sports, and I wanted to do everything that he did. We watched a lot of sport on TV, and my parents were always encouraging us to get outside, to play, to go swimming, to climb trees. I was the epitome of a tomboy growing up. But when I found dance, I really found my passion. Dance was not something that came naturally to me. I had to work really hard at it. But again, just like we talked about with getting to the summit, every advancement I made, every improvement that I made meant that much more, because I knew I had worked to earn it and to gain that progress. By my senior year in high school, I was training about 40 hours a week outside of my full-time school schedule. I was competing at a dance studio that was highly competitive. That's where I was training and learning and growing. And I was also competing on my high school dance team that was highly competitive and became nationally recognized, a national championship team. And again, by my senior year, I had become a pre-professional dancer. I was getting a lot of really phenomenal opportunities that I had never imagined possible. But unfortunately, the more opportunities I was getting and the more pressure I was feeling in my dance career, the more I became a practice dancer rather than a competition or audition dancer. And what I mean by that is I came alive in rehearsal. I came alive in practice. It was a chance for me to experiment. It was a chance for me to take risks because there was nothing to lose. I knew what routines I was in. I knew what dances we were in, and that was all set up. So practice was really a chance for me to test my boundaries, if you will. When I got to competition or when I got to an audition, though, all of a sudden there was something to lose. There was an opportunity to lose. There was an opportunity to let people down, to let my mom down, my family down, to let my teachers who had put so much time and energy into me down, to let myself down. Essentially, in competition and auditions, there was a chance to fail. And that anxiety weighed on me to the point where I really never reached my full potential in a competition or an audition setting, in an evaluative setting. I definitely reached my potential in rehearsal more than a couple of times. And it was such a beautiful feeling. And it was so frustrating that I couldn't find that same level in the performances that mattered most. So I graduated from high school, and for many reasons I won't get into, I ended up retiring from competitive dance. I transitioned into a coaching and teaching role. So dance was still a part of my life for a very long time and still is. But in my undergraduate work, I was a little bit lost. Dance had been my life. And so I ended up changing my major 6 times, but eventually landed on psychology. I really loved the idea of helping people. And my senior year, my last semester, I heard about this thing called sports psychology. So I decided to learn more about that because if I could combine my love for sport and performance with my love for helping people, I felt like I had really found something meaningful for me. And so I went on to get my master's degree in kinesiology with an emphasis in sports psychology. And during that program, I started getting to consult, getting to work with people, some of whom were struggling with the same things I struggled with, some of whom had different struggles, different obstacles they were trying to overcome. And I was able to come in and try to help them, just like that Sherpa, find the skills, the tools, the resources to help them in those struggles. I fell in love with the field, and I also fell in love with teaching. So I ended up at West Virginia University, where I got a second master's degree in counseling and a PhD in sport and exercise psychology. I continued consulting during my doctoral work. I continued teaching during my doctoral program, and my love and passion for this field really grew exponentially. I just couldn't get enough of helping people, not just in their performance domain, but in life overall, find and learn skills that are going to help them increase the chances of reaching their potential. This was so important to me that I ended up moving forward with a certification as a mental performance consultant through the Association for Applied Sports Psychology to show that I had reached these minimum expectations of competency and training and education, and also to make sure that I am staying up to date in my training, because that to me is really important, to make sure I'm giving the best possible help to those with whom I'm working. So again, because of the struggles I experienced as a performer myself, my heart yearns to help others in their own performance settings. And like I said earlier, just in life in general. And so as we go through, again, I just really hope that some of these topics hit home for you. Not all of them will, but hopefully there are a couple of tidbits, a couple of tools that you will find helpful for your students and for yourself. Now, when I start talking to a group, one of the places that I like to start is with motivation. Now, that might seem pretty general, and it is, but all of us have kind of a different understanding of motivation. We have different language about motivation, And so to me, motivation is a great place to start because it's something that we all tend to understand. And as educators, as teachers, as coaches, it's something we tend to talk quite often about. But oftentimes there's some misunderstandings about motivation that can be helpful to kind of demystify, if you will, or to clarify, again, both for you and your students. So when we're talking about motivation, Deci and Ryan, back in the 80s, identified two different types of categories of motivation, if you will. Intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Now, these might be terms you're familiar with. This might be brand new. Either way, the good news is that these different types of motivation tend to show up for all of us, right? Now, again, based on what you've heard about these different types of motivation, there might be some myths that you know, there might be some misunderstandings that you know. So let's kind of take a step back and talk generally about these two types of motivation. So as you can see here on the slide, intrinsic motivation is really about doing the thing for the thing itself. Playing music because of the enjoyment you get from playing music. Because playing music is fun. Because playing music offers an opportunity to grow and to master a difficult skill. Because playing music is a purpose that you have. It gives you purpose. It gives you meaning. It's about the thing itself, enjoying the thing itself. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is doing the thing because of what the thing gives us, what we get out of doing the thing. So again, with playing music, I'm not necessarily playing music for playing music itself. I'm playing music because of what I get from playing music. Things like rewards. Rewards can be praise and attention. Rewards could be scholarships, prizes, trophies. It might be fame and benefits. I know that's really hard to reach in the music industry, but some people get there, and there are little baby steps along the way, right? Extrinsic motivators could be something like winning, getting that trophy, winning first place, getting the getting the job you auditioned for, getting the seat that you auditioned for. Now, when we talk about these two different types of motivation, sometimes extrinsic motivation kind of comes out as the bad guy. Extrinsic motivation we think of as this motive that in the short term might feel really good, but we should try to eliminate all extrinsic motivation and just move to intrinsic motivation. Now, there is some truth to that. Intrinsic motivation of the two is far more long-lasting, it's far more enduring and resilient, because unfortunately with extrinsic motivation, as soon as that extrinsic motivator goes away, as soon as that attention and praise go away, as soon as that fame and fortune go away, as soon as the winning goes away, my motivation goes away as well. So intrinsic motivation does have a number of benefits. But extrinsic motivation has its place as well. In fact, if we're trying to help people with behavior change, if we're trying to help them start a new behavior or increase a new behavior, for instance, getting them to transition to practicing 4 days a week from 2, or practicing more difficult pieces of music rather than those they're more comfortable with, extrinsic motivation might be really beneficial in the short term. The goal would be to help people transition to intrinsic motivation in the long term. Again, so just in case those extrinsic rewards go away, that person still stays motivated. That's really important. Making sure that there's balance, making sure that we're trying to help people move toward intrinsic motivation so that that's there and it can balance out those extrinsic motives. Because let's be honest, those extrinsic motives feel good. Praise feels good. Attention, rewards, winning feels good. But if that's all we have, we might run into some problems down the road. Another myth we might run into with motivation is sometimes we have a tendency to use language like, oh, they're just not motivated. They just don't have motivation. They just need more motivation. I know I've been guilty of that kind of language in the past in my own coaching and teaching roles. We tend to think of motivation as this either or, this black or white. They either have it or they don't. We either have it or we don't. And in actuality, it's a little bit better to think of motivation as a continuum. Some days, some moments, we might have more motivation than others. In these current, very unprecedented, stressful, and frankly, just weird times, you might notice your motivation waning from moment to moment, day to day, week to week. So yes, sometimes we have more motivation than others, but that isn't to say that we lack motivation completely or we have motivation completely. It's much more of a continuum. Also, it's important to understand the idea of competing motives. So in a given situation, we might be motivated to do something, but we might be more motivated to do something else. For instance, in this moment, you personally, right now, hopefully are motivated to continue watching this recording, to continue watching this presentation. But at the same time, you might feel a pull from conflicting motives, motives that are pulling you toward other behavior, motives to sit and just watch TV and relax for a little bit, motives to work around the house, motives to care for your kids, motives to work on other projects. So it isn't that we're necessarily missing motivation. We just have competing motives. And at any given time, the teeter-totter, if you will, might move more toward another behavior than it does toward our current behavior. So translating this to your students might be motivated to practice, but their motivation to do something else in that moment might just be stronger. So it's a matter of recognizing where they're at in their motivation and how we might be able to shift them or move them or make the behavior we're looking for just a little bit stronger. And we'll talk about how to do that in a moment. So again, the goal is to think of motivation on a continuum, to recognize that push and pull of competing motives, to recognize that extrinsic motivation isn't bad in and of itself as long as we have balance with intrinsic motivation. And also important to realize that our motivation might also impact our appraisals or our interpretations of situations. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But remember, extrinsic motivators are good in the short term. They feel good. They're more temporary though. They're more short term. And unfortunately, we tend to build a tolerance toward these extrinsic motivators. So in other words, the praise that motivated us in day 1 might not even make a difference come day 30, come day 60, come year 1. And also, those extrinsic motivators can be appraised as threatening. In other words, if I'm afraid that I might lose that reward, that extrinsic motivator, now all of a sudden my motive shifts. And instead of operating out of a joy or out of an excitement, I'm now operating out of fear, which I'm sure many of you have experienced performances, either yourself or of your students, where that fear tenses them up and really just creates a forced and uncomfortable and less than stellar performance. Those intrinsic motivators, though, as we can help people shift, those intrinsic motivators are more long-term, like I said earlier, more resilient. Now, we don't get those intrinsic motivators as fast as we want to. They take longer to show up. Progress takes a long time. Growth takes a long time. Sometimes it can take a long time to find the enjoyment and fun of playing the same piece of music over and over. But they are there more regularly, they're there more consistently, and they're there more resiliently. So again, not the bad guy. Extrinsic motivators are not the bad guy, but can we help shift people towards intrinsic motivation? And can we help build motivation when those competing motives are pulling them somewhere else? So how do we do that? I am so glad you asked. Again, Deci and Ryan developed a model called self-determination theory. Not important to know the name of the model. But essentially they said that our motivation goes up when we can meet 3 basic needs. And those 3 basic needs are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy is a sense of choice. It's a sense of independence. It's a sense of control over our situation. So thinking about the situation that you're in now with social distancing, perhaps some of you are in shelter in place. Right now, our autonomy might feel low because we don't feel as though we have a ton of choice or a ton of control. But in reality, if we look around, there actually are many areas where we still have choice. We just have to work a little harder to find them. Now, please hear me. As an educator, as a teacher, I'm not saying that you need to give students free rein to choose whatever they want to do in practice today, to make practice whatever they want it to be. Play whatever you want. Play how long you want. Not what I'm talking about. But as an educator, you can get creative in how you provide opportunities for choice. So perhaps you tell your student that they can choose which piece they start with today, option A or option B. Perhaps you give them the choice of how much they focus on one string of notes versus playing the piece in its entirety. Perhaps you allow them to choose when they get to take a break. Would they like to take a couple of shorter breaks throughout rehearsal, or would they like to take one longer break in the middle of rehearsal? Using your creativity to incorporate those opportunities for choice, for independence, for a little bit of control builds that sense of autonomy. It starts meeting that need for autonomy, and they become more invested in the rehearsal, and hopefully then that motivation increases, particularly that intrinsic motivation. The second need is competence. Competence is a sense of ability. A competence is a sense of being able to successfully accomplish the task at hand. Now, again, please hear me. I am not saying that as a teacher, as a coach, as an educator, you need to go into practice and give them the easiest piece of music so they are able to successfully complete it, and that's that. Competence actually relies on a bit of challenge. So again, as an educator, coach, teacher, you can come in, recognize the level your student is currently at, and challenge them, but challenge them in a way where they can meet that challenge, that really pulls from their current ability and shows them how much they've grown and how much they are capable of achieving. Unfortunately, some of the old school coaching style, teaching style, educating style was that we have to constantly challenge to a point where they never really are successful, so they're constantly growing. And what research has shown is that if we never meet that need for competence, our motivation is going to go down because we then doubt our ability to be successful. So again, I'm not saying it has to be really easy. You should challenge your students. You should challenge those you're leading. You should challenge yourself. But make sure that challenge meets their current level, their current skill level, so that there is the opportunity for them to rise to the challenge and feel that moment of success, of successfully accomplishing the task at hand to build their feeling of competence. The third need is that of relatedness, and it's very much what it sounds like. Our need for relationship, our need for connection. Again, given the current climate, our need for relatedness right now might not be getting met in the same ways it used to. Thank goodness we have technology right now so that we still have ways to connect with others, to meet with others electronically, virtually, like we're doing now. But that need for relatedness is really the need for connection, the need for relationship. Yes, sometimes music can be isolating. Yes, sometimes performance can be isolating, particularly if you're an individual musician, right? Playing pieces on your own, but there's still a sense of community around. You and your students work collaboratively. You're still reaching out to others to learn from, to teach, and so on. And the amazing thing about relatedness is that it provides an opportunity for you to get to know your students more. And if you teach a large group, an opportunity for them to get to know each other more. Unfortunately, I think sometimes we get so focused on accomplishing the tasks at hand that we forget the importance of connection and of relationship. And according to this model, according to this theory, the more we can provide opportunities for that, again, it doesn't have to be the whole time. There's still work that needs to be done. But the more we can create space for those relationships to be built and then strengthened, hopefully not only does that increase motivation, but that also increases intrinsic motivation. So again, get to be creative, have fun with this. Think about ways that you might be able to incorporate autonomy, competence, and relatedness into your practice or your rehearsals or your time with others, or even your own practice and rehearsals. But like we talked about before, one of the impacts that motivation can have on our overall experience is our cognitive appraisal. Cognitive appraisal is a fancy way to say the way we interpret a situation in front of us. There are two main ways that we interpret a stressful or a demanding situation in front of us. The first is as a threat. If we interpret a situation as a threat, then we are thinking that our resources are not strong enough, big enough, great enough to meet the demand being asked of us. So in other words, if we interpret a situation as a threat, that means that we see the demand as outweighing our resources, right? When we see the demand as being bigger, greater, stronger than the resources we currently possess, we're going to see this situation as a threat. The other option is to interpret a situation as a challenge. And that means that we're interpreting the situation opposite. We understand that the demand is big. This is a serious demand. It's going to be difficult. It's going to take a lot of work and effort. But we stop and reflect on the resources that we have, and we look and say, yes, this is going to be difficult, but I know I can do it. So when I see a situation as a threat, the demand outweighs my resources. When I see a situation as a challenge, my resources outweigh the demand. Now, what's really cool about this is that if it's all about the resources we perceive that we have, then we can shift our appraisal. So for instance, we face a brick wall, which I hope is very rare in your experience as a musician. But we face a proverbial brick wall or a metaphorical brick wall. There we go. And if we see this as a threat, then we're going to say, you know what? I can't get over this brick wall. This brick wall is too big. It's too strong. I don't have a pickaxe. I don't have anything to get over this wall. There's no way I can climb this wall. It's 5 times taller than I am. I haven't worked out in months. There's no way I can climb this wall. No way. When I see that situation as a threat, my motivation is automatically going to go down, right? Because I don't think I can be successful. I don't have the resources I need to be successful. On the other hand, if I can look at this brick wall and say, wow, yeah, that's a big brick wall. That's going to be difficult to overcome. But you know what? I think I have a shovel. Maybe I can dig under the brick wall. Or maybe if I take a step back and look around and realize, oh, the brick wall ends 10 feet that way. Why don't I just walk around the brick wall? Or, you know what, I have some climbing shoes. Maybe I can try to climb this brick wall. It's still going to be difficult and it's going to take a lot of energy. But I think I can do this. All of a sudden, my motivation to continue forward through, over, under, around that brick wall goes up because I can identify the resources that are going to help me in the process. So as educators, teachers, coaches, if we can help people identify the resources that they have, we can positively impact their appraisal of the situation. Not helping them be naive that, oh yeah, no, it's easy to jump that brick wall, no problem. No, it's going to be difficult. But what are the resources you have? The preparation, the practice, the rehearsal you've put in, the skill you developed, the growth and the progress you've made, the opportunity to learn, all of these resources that you have to help you overcome that obstacle. That changing that appraisal might help increase people's motivation or maintain motivation over time. So let's talk about one of the biggest brick walls that we face as performers and just in life in general. Don't worry, I'm not going to start dropping 4-letter words here, but we are going to talk about the F word. We're going to talk about failure. Failure is inevitable as a performer, as a teacher, as a human being. I'm going to let that sit there for a second because I know many of you don't like that. I know I don't like that. I am personally a recovering perfectionist. Failing and making mistakes is not something that comes naturally to me. It's not something I look forward to or approach. But making mistakes is inevitable. Failing is inevitable. We are not perfect. And in fact, if we are really challenging ourselves, if we're really stepping outside of our comfort zones, then we're going to fail. Failure is a sign that we're trying new things. We're trying to grow. Think about kids learning how to walk. They don't wait to walk until they know they can be successful. They just go for it. And they fall all the time. They run into things. Sometimes they stand up and without even taking a step, they just topple back over. But every time they get a little bit stronger, and every time they move a little bit closer to that skill of walking. And without having failed, without having made those mistakes, they wouldn't have gotten to the point of walking. They never would have fully learned that skill. Isn't our path in music, our path in dance, our path in life the same way? We don't like failing. We don't like making mistakes. And I'm not asking you to start rejoicing when those mistakes happen. But one, they are a sign that we are stepping outside of our comfort zone and trying something new. We are challenging ourselves. And two, that is where we learn and we grow. We don't really learn and grow when we're succeeding. Succeeding feels good. Please don't get me wrong. It feels fantastic. But we don't necessarily grow and learn in those moments. We learn and grow most from failure and from making mistakes when we allow those things to teach us and to teach us well. So when we talk about failure, the two big questions to reflect upon are, one, how do we personally appraise failure? How are we personally interpreting it? Are we appraising failure as a threat, as something that is near impossible to overcome because we do not have the resources to do it? Or are we appraising it as a challenge, as something that, yeah, failing doesn't feel good. It hurts. Making mistakes feels awful sometimes. But I can get through this and I can become better because of this. Very different appraisal. And again, think about how those different interpretations are then naturally going to impact my motivation to continue forward. But it's not just about how we interpret failure. It's also how we're encouraging others to appraise or interpret failure and mistakes. What language are we using? What are we focusing on after their performances, in practice and rehearsal? Are we moving them toward a perfectionistic mindset, or are we moving them more toward a growth mindset, a learning mindset of being resilient and open to what those mistakes and failures can teach us? Again, you don't have to like it. You do not have to like it, but you can respect and appreciate how much you can grow from those moments. It's not easy. But again, the problem becomes when we interpret failure as long-term, when we interpret failure as personal, as something about me, that's going to significantly decrease my motivation because there's no sign it's going to change anytime soon. Failure is long-term, and it means I then am a failure. If I fail at music, I myself am a failure. Why would I keep trying? If instead we interpret failure as short-term, it happened this time, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen next time. Or as circumstantial, interesting, it happened this time because maybe I didn't prepare correctly, or maybe someone else just had an amazing day at the audition, or maybe, I didn't give 100% effort of what I have to give today. Obviously, that's going to impact our motivation. That's going to impact our drive to continue forward, especially when we're moving on the path toward mastery. Now, when we think about mastery and becoming an expert, Erickson and his colleagues have been at the forefront of this research. And years ago, my goodness gracious, almost 20 years ago at this point, no, almost 30 years ago, wow, they studied experts from a number of different settings, including music. And they wanted to learn what made an expert an expert. What did it take? And they came up with the quote unquote magic number, which unfortunately has been taken out of context in a lot of different settings. So I want to take some time and clarify these two numbers, 10 years or 10,000 hours. Essentially, what Erikson and his colleagues found was that experts have spent on average 10 years or 10,000 hours on their skill, on their work to become an expert. But it's also very intentional practice. It's deliberate practice. And this assumes that you're continuing to put forth effort, even once you've reached an acceptable level, if you will. So even after your students reach a level of ability where people are going, oh, that's really cool. You can play piano, you can play guitar, you can play the drums, you can play the flute, the trumpet, the French horn. That's really cool. Yeah, you know what? I can. Well, clearly there's always room to grow. There's always room to continue improving and learning. So to become an expert, that assumes that once we've reached that acceptable level of being good, that we still want to continue learning and growing. But the cool thing about this is that it provides a framework for you to meet students where they're at. That recognizing not all of them might want to be experts. Some of them might be perfectly fine at that acceptable level of being an intermediate player, of being good enough. And that's okay. Then you can help them maintain that skill. Maybe check in every once in a while, see if their motives have changed. But if you have a student who's really driven and wants to keep moving forward, then you can remind them, okay, here's the kind of commitment, the kind of dedication, and the kind of effort it's going to take to help you get there. But this is not just 10,000 hours or 10 years of going through the motions. It's very intentional and deliberate. So let's talk about deliberate practice. Now, please hear me. There is a time and a place, I fully understand, to just get in the reps, to play those notes over and over and over again, to play that transition time and time again. But the focus of deliberate practice is, are we doing something just for quantity, or are we doing it for quality? Even when we're repeating the same behavior, the same movement, the same notes over and over again. Deliberate practice is essentially an effortful activity. So we're putting forth effort, motivated by the goal of improving performance. So when we are in rehearsal, when we are in practice, our goal that day is to get better. Now let's remind ourselves, the learning curve is not a straight line, right? Students do not just gradually climb this perfectly beautiful summit and it's easy and it's straight and no, we know that, right? We know that it's much more like this, and then sometimes they jump back, but then they hop forward, and then it's a mess. But even on the days when we take steps back, even on the days when we're struggling, even on the days when we feel like I'm better than this, I've done better than this in the past, we recognize, this is part of learning, right? I'm making progress right now. Yes, I might be taking one step back, but this is allowing me to take 2, 3, 5 steps forward in the future. So the goal remains improving performance. Even if it doesn't look like in this moment, I am improving. So what does deliberate practice really look like? Well, there's motivation to attend to the task at hand. One of the problems we run into with quantity of a specific movement or practice is that we tend to zone out when we're doing it, right? We're playing these notes over and over again, and it allows my mind to kind of go somewhere else when I'm doing these notes physically. I'm not attending to them. With deliberate practice, we are motivated to stay focused on what we're doing so that we understand where the improvement's happening, where the growth's happening, and where we can continue improving in the future. There are also very well-designed tasks, like we talked about earlier, that you are meeting the student where they're at, meeting yourself where you're at, designing challenging tasks that match their level of ability, that aren't necessarily easy for them to reach, but that build their sense of competence, that through effort and hard work, they can get there. There's immediate and informative feedback. In other words, when something happens, you provide your students with that feedback as immediately as possible. Please know I'm not saying to interrupt their performance, right? But right after they're done, not only should you give that feedback as soon as possible, but also making sure the feedback is specific and informative. Yes, sometimes it feels good to get that general feedback. Man, that was so good. That sounded great. Great job. But what was great about it? What specifically was good? Where specifically is there still room for improvement, and how can they do that? What specifically can they do to keep getting better? And then repetition, which we've talked about. Repetition is important, but are they quality repetitions, or are they quantity repetitions where I can zone out and not necessarily stay focused on what I'm doing? One of the interesting pieces about deliberate practice as well is that it can include practicing elements of performance that sometimes we take for granted. For instance, practicing walking in, sitting down, or taking your stance, playing the piece, and then exiting. Or practicing standing up for an extended period of time, if that's part of the performance. Practicing sitting in one position, if that's part of the performance. Playing with noise in the background, if that might be part of the experience. Dimming the lights or matching the lighting to match whatever performance venue or audition venue they might be experiencing. Wearing the same clothing they're going to be wearing during the audition or the performance. I don't know about you as a dancer, sometimes I would be in practice and feel like I could move just so freely. And then I would get into a costume and I would feel so restricted. And without the opportunity to practice in it, I wasn't sure exactly how to move well. Chances are you've experienced something similar, maybe a certain blazer, a certain shirt, certain pants that you wear, even certain shoes. Those can all become distractions if we haven't deliberately practiced them. Another important part of practice that we don't always talk about is the importance of sleep and rest. Again, I'm sure you can all connect with me when I say that practicing when fatigued, practicing when unfocused is not ideal. Now, please hear me again. We shouldn't wait until we're 100% to practice. There are going to be times we get to an audition, we get to a performance, and we don't feel good. We're exhausted, we're tired, we didn't sleep well the day before. So practicing when we're tired can have benefits, but we want to make sure we're doing our best to rest well, to sleep well, again, to increase the chances of having the most energy possible when performance comes. But again, even when you're tired, still practice. Practice giving 100% of what you have, even if you don't have 100% to give that day. So what's cool about this is that expert performers really design their lives to optimize engaging in deliberate practice, making it purposeful, making it intentional. But it's also really amazing to kind of release the pressure of feeling like we have to perform always at high intensity for hours and hours and hours on end to improve. No, what deliberate practice is saying is that actually sometimes quality 2 hours of practice could be better than 5 or 8 hours of going through the motions, not being focused, and just kind of doing whatever we want. And that frees us from overtraining or moving toward burnout because we're practicing so much and so intensely that we forget to create that time and space for rest. But given the repetitive nature of deliberate practice, given the intensity, the purpose, and the intention, doing things over and over and over again, this is not inherently enjoyable. So I thought it might be interesting to share the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was a very strong, very capable human being who lived in the time of the Greek gods. And Sisyphus was so strong, in fact, and so confident about his abilities that he believed he should be a god. Now, this caused some problems, and the gods punished him in many ways that never really worked out because Sisyphus was very creative and always managed to get out of them. But one day he eavesdropped on a meeting of the gods. He climbed Mount Olympus and he listened in on their private meeting. And the gods basically said that was the final straw. No more. So they punished Sisyphus to an eternity of rolling a boulder uphill. Every time Sisyphus made the boulder reach the top, every time he reached the top with the boulder would fall down to the bottom and he would have to start all over again. I'm sure that you can, that resonates maybe sometimes with you in practice or rehearsal, feeling like you're just pushing the boulder up the hill over and over and over again without maybe seeing much growth or much progress. But we have the really unique opportunity to pause and to help others find enjoyment and fun in the monotony, to be able to stop and appreciate the work, to appreciate progress rather than just the destination. Choosing to find joy in the mundane. What is so cool about this story is that instead of letting this punishment define him, instead of sulking in the misery, Sisyphus chose to turn it into a game. He chose to push the boulder up different ways each time. So one time he would push it up with his back. One time he'd push it up with his feet. One time in a handstand. One time sideways. And he found a way to make it fun and enjoyable, even though it was the same thing over and over and over again. So again, you have this unique opportunity to help people keep pushing the boulder, to keep that motivation going, even when it's mundane, even when it's difficult, even when you have played this piece 1,000 and 1,000 and 1,000 more times. You can appreciate the progress, the opportunity to learn and grow, to choose to find joy in that mundane. Now, a more recent extension of Erikson's research in expertise was Carol Dweck's work in growth and fixed mindset. Now, again, these tend to be pretty popular terms, particularly in education, but some of you might not be familiar with them as others, or some of you might have heard of them but aren't quite sure what it means. So I'd love to take some time and talk about not only what growth mindset means, but how it might impact your work as a music educator, a music teacher. Essentially, what Dweck found is that some people who are on the path to mastery, on the path to expertise, some people tend to be very resilient and continue forth, and some people unfortunately end up quitting, particularly those who seemed really talented at the start. So why was that happening? And she ended up creating these two kind of classifications, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Now, a growth mindset believes that our skills, our abilities change over time. With effort, over time, we believe we can get better. That's a growth mindset. I firmly believe I can improve and grow and learn. A fixed mindset, on the other hand, believes that our skills and our abilities are more ingrained. It's more born with them than they are improved. So in other words, I'm either born intelligent or I'm not. I'm either born a music savant or I'm not. I'm either born a musician or I'm not. So yes, there might be room a little bit for improvement, but it's much more black or white versus the growth mindset that's much more, oh no, I can keep climbing this ladder. So naturally, that growth mindset comes with a desire to learn and grow. I believe that with effort, I can get better. So I'm going to keep working to get better. So that effort becomes the path to mastery versus the fixed mindset that believes, no, I either have mastery or I don't. So for a growth mindset, mistakes become a part of learning. Mistakes become an opportunity to learn and grow, like we talked about earlier. But unfortunately, in a fixed mindset, mistakes become evidence that maybe I'm not as good as I thought. Maybe I'm not gifted with this talent. So mistakes become feared, which then reflects our relationship with failure. For a growth mindset, failure is temporary, right? It's short term. It doesn't say anything about who I am. It just says I'm not there yet. But a fixed mindset sees failure not only as long-term, as something that's near impossible to get over as a threat, right? But it also talks about who I am. Then I am a failure. Then I don't have this skill. Then I don't have this ability. So feedback for the growth mindset is welcomed and appreciated because that's going to help me climb the ladder faster. That's going to help me reach the summit of the mountain. But with a fixed mindset, no, if I have this skill and ability, you don't need to tell me how to get there. I can get there myself because I have this gift. The other incredible difference is that for people with a growth mindset, Success of others provides inspiration because I can learn from you. I can see what you did and how does that relate to me and where I am and what can I learn from that? And if we can all work harder to improve, then congratulations, you succeeded and I can go succeed too. But with a fixed mindset, success of others is threatening because if you have it, then maybe I don't. Or I'm going to compare myself to you, and if you're better than I am, then maybe I don't have it in the first place. So one of the biggest words that we can use to help foster a growth mindset is yet. You can't do that yet. You don't understand it yet. You're not able to yet because that points us to that short-term, temporary appraisal, right? Versus the long-term, permanent and personal. I can't do this. That's very permanent. That's very personal. I can't do this yet. Aha. Now we have room for discussion. Now we have room for growth. So what else as educators can you do to help foster a growth mindset in the settings in which you work? Well, just like we talked about earlier, that immediate and informative feedback, not only should it be immediate and informative, but making sure that feedback is about effort rather than traits. So instead of saying something like, you're such a good musician, and pointing to that more permanent interpretation of trait, instead we point to, man, that effort was great on that. I love how you kept playing through that little hiccup in the third verse, or whatever it is, right? So you're giving that feedback about effort. Or I notice you're lagging a little bit in this section. How do we keep that effort high there? So it's focusing on the temporary, it's focusing on the controllable things rather than making it personal and long-term. Noticing improvement as well, no matter how small, right? Again, remember, if the learning curve is like this and jumping back and forward and all over the place, then helping people recognize the places of improvement, recognizing our own areas of improvement can continue encouraging us forward. We talked earlier about our own appraisals of failure and making mistakes, and you have a unique opportunity to model a healthy relationship with mistakes and failures, seeing those as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to improve. One of my favorite questions to encourage people, parents, friends, teachers, educators, coaches, is asking, what did you learn? How did you grow today? What challenged you today? Again, those point us toward growth instead of saying, did you win? Did you do good? What was the outcome? That's more driven by that fixed mindset, right? And again, I can't emphasize it enough. Yet, you are a work in progress and your work is not yet done. Your work is a work in progress. It's all about the progress. It's not about the destination. Because guess what? Once you reach the destination, you might realize there's another destination you can go to when we have that growth mindset. It's not that you are or are not. It's that you can. It's that with effort and with time, you can. You can be. So in summary, I hope these ideas have been helpful. I know these are very complex and dynamic topics that we've covered today. And really, in a lot of ways, we've just kind of covered the surface of them. But some of the tools I hope that you're taking away and considering how these might work in your practice, in your rehearsal, and what you're teaching others is helping how to foster that productive motivation. Not just how to build motivation, but how to build productive and resilient motivation, right? Building awareness of our perspectives, our conclusions, our appraisals, our interpretations of situations, and how that can impact our motivation. Plus identifying resources, right? Not just for ourselves, but in others. What resources do we have to be successful in this setting, in this demanding, stressful situation? What opportunities are we creating for deliberate practice? And similarly, what opportunities are we creating for a growth mindset? How is our language helping people, ourselves included, move toward that growth mindset rather than that fixed mindset? So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you all today. I do truly hope it's been helpful. And again, thank you so much to the MTNA conference organizers for inviting me into this creative platform to still interact with you all. Like I said at the beginning, please see my email and my phone number here. I would love for you all to reach out with questions or comments, how this impacted you, what you're taking away, and even for us to continue the conversation further. Again, if you have questions or even if you want to just exchange ideas, you all are the experts in music education. And I hope that my training and my background has been able to get the gears turning, so to speak, get you thinking about different ways to incorporate some of that into your work. I'll end now by putting up a slide with the references that I pointed to throughout this presentation for your own reference if you're interested in doing more research. Thank you so much for your time and your energy, for the opportunity to be here, and I truly hope that I hear from some of you in the future. Take care, be safe, be healthy. Thank you so much.